Welcome, everybody. You are listening to Birth of a New Earth. My name is Jeanice Barcelo, and I am on the line tonight with some incredibly beautiful people, Arthur and Fiona Cristian. I just want to give a brief introduction for you guys so that people understand a little bit about who you are. Unless you'd like to introduce yourself, which would you prefer, Arthur?
This is Fiona Cristian here.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. Hey, Fiona. Would you like me to read your bio, or do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Oh, why don't you just read it out, and then it's short and sweet.
Okay, sure. So here's what they have to say. It took a bank changing contracts on Arthur and Fiona Cristian without warning, and then refusing to do anything about it, for Arthur and Fiona to fully wake up to the extent of the hardship and suffering being experienced by so many, and to the organized crime manipulating everything to be this way. During their court case that Arthur and Fiona fought to save Fiona's family home, they became aware of the millions of others who had lost everything at the hands of the banksters and the courts and government institutions that supported the banks. They realized that there was no longer any community immunity, that we no longer stood up for each other against crime and corruption because we were so isolated and divided from each other. The decision to not let the banksters and their associates get away with their crimes led to the start of the Love for Life website in 2005, primarily as a way to tell their story and the stories of others. As Arthur and Fiona searched for a remedy to their situation, it grew to be an information website with thousands of articles, videos, etc., covering many, many subject matters, from health issues to conspiracy theories to discoveries that go against the official version of science and history. At the same time they were gathering and sifting through all this information, they, and particularly Arthur, began to unravel the system in order to find the remedy to the suffering caused by the system. After many, many hours spent scrutinizing information and discussing and debating with many, many people, the thing was Arthur and Fiona have come up with the remedy that brings peace, freedom, truth, joy, abundance, and do no harm for all of life without loss of uniqueness, originality, and without the need for slaves and rulers. The steps of kingdom, quote unquote, shows us how to start taking the steps that lead us out of our lives of enslavement under the system to lives as fully conscious man, taking full responsibility for our lives and the lives of those around us. The creation of this remedy is now the primary focus of Arthur and Fiona, and they are using every means possible to spread this information. Yeah, for more details, go to loveforlife.com.au. Arthur and Fiona are in Australia. I wonder if we could start the conversation because you used the word man, capital M-A-N, instead of the word human. So can you or Fiona tell us what's the distinction between man and human?
Well, a man is in present sense, where you can touch, taste, feel, smell, hear, see man. A human is a reflection. It's a shadow of man. It is a fantasy. It's like Alice in Wonderland, where the child, that you can go and visit the child who's performing Alice in Wonderland. You can go and hug the child, touch, taste, feel, smell, hear, see the child, but you can't touch, taste, feel, smell, hear, see Alice in Wonderland that she's performing. So we're in the system. We have a situation where we've all been taught to believe that our birth certificate is man, is who we are, or our driver's license or birth certificate. And not only that, but all the props that make up the system that we've been told are real as well. So human means shadow. It means a reflection. For example, looking at a mirror, you can't talk to the reflection of you in the mirror. All you can do is fantasize that it's talking to you. So the same thing with hue. Hue is not real. We're not the fantasy. We're not the intellectual property of the name Arthur Cristian. Arthur Cristian is the living man. The sound that comes out of Arthur's mouth is real. the flush, the blood flows, the flesh lives. You can visit Arthur on the land, but you can't visit the driver's license of Arthur Cristian. You can't visit the birth certificate Arthur visit. You can't talk to it. All you can do is get a representative representing Arthur Cristian. That's the big difference here, and it's a massive difference, and it's one we've got to wake up to, because we're not the hues. We're not the shade or the greys or the blacks of man. We're man. We are the only ones in present sense.
You know, I had a man named Patrick Jordan on one of my other radio shows recently, and he was talking about the definition of the word human actually meaning a slave to a lord. When you break it down and look at the origins of the word, human. So that's another really interesting point about the word human, and the point that you're making, Arthur, is really, really important in terms of who we are, you know, in person, in the flesh, as the blood runs through us. I know this is all, you know, the language of casting spells and trying to break the spells of the legal system, but we are in the flesh, not, you know, an all capital corporate entity that gets a driver's license. That's not who we are. So I think the work that you're doing is incredibly important. You have so much information to share about the system and the casting of spells and the black magic. I wonder if you can share that with us, Arthur, some information about that.
Well, to continue on talking about hue and human to lead to this question is that every time we breathe out, we create water. This water is living, it's sensory. You can touch, taste, feel, smell, hear, see the water of our breath, whether you want to call it mist or whatever. Every thought that we are thinking, all the images that we intend to project into the dream of life is passed through the water of our breath, and it is maintained in present sense. This is why we can access our ancestors, all of man that ever was and all of man that ever will be, including living creator, because the water is in present sense. So it does not disappear into something that is nonsense where it's invisible. So everything about the truth is always in present sense. The sun shines through the water in present sense. Every motion occurring in the dream of life occurs only in present sense. All man's thoughts occur only in present sense. Everything that is being set into motion occurs only in present sense. This is significant to realize the difference, because the fantasies of the hues are not in present sense, because they do not exist. They are just in the imagination, or what we call intellectual property. The whole of the system is intellectual property, and it requires us to represent these images. I guess I should pull back again and say that every thought is an image. When I say hi, you can imagine me waving my hand at you. You know, that is the image of the sound of hi, or the phonetics of that sound. The same with the word a. When I say a, you know that the image of a is already imprinted in your senses, in your brain, because you know what the shape of a means. So I'm passing an image through my breath to you, even though we're using internet, dead things to communicate. We're actually right now through the water. You can sense the a that I'm projecting to you. The truth of who we are is in the water of our breath, and everything about the truth is in the water of our breath. And we don't need to teach our children about the images that are in the water of our breath, that we call the trees, that we call the seeds, that we call the clouds, that we call the insects, and everything that makes up earth and nature, and all the celestial bodies, because everything's in water. This, to us, the system, and those behind the system have lied to us about system science and said that out there in the celestial bodies is dust and nothing else in space, and that everything's floating around something completely different to what we know as nature. To us, all that is a lie. We see it that everything is water. You cannot have life without water. It's impossible to have sensory life without the presence of water. So I'm sort of...
Well, I was just going to say that the subject Jeanice was talking about the spells, and with relation to the thoughts that we are projecting all the time and the images, what's happened to us under the system from when we're very young, we are overwhelmed by images that are teaching us to fall for and then to reproduce the spells of the system that keep us all in. I mean, we all police each other to stay in the system with the images and thoughts that we project. So that's where the biggest spell of the system is. It's teaching us to become the maintainers of the system by continuing all these images that have been put into our brain.
Yeah, because
give us an example of that. Like, how are we? What would we do in a day that would be a contributing to casting a spell and giving life to an artificial system that has no real function in a true reality?
Here's a simple way of looking at it. Imagine opening up the book of Alice in Wonderland for the very first time, and you have your children sitting on your lap who have never been exposed to this kind of information, or what we call images. And there they are, you're reading to them an English alphabet language, and creating the images that are impregnating into their fantasy, into their imagination. And through the repetition of doing this day after day, week after week, they build such a vivid sense of belonging to these images that they want to represent the images constantly. They're thinking about them all the time. One day you come home and you find that they've changed the whole family home into the settings of Wonderland, and they've gone into their bedroom and made a mess and pulled all these clothes out and pulled all their toys out. And they moved all the tables and chairs and all the furniture and completely disrupted the whole of the family home to create the fantasy world of Wonderland. And there they are, dressed in costume and title, representing Alice in Wonderland. And you ask them, Peter, Mary, where's Alice? Are you playing Alice? And they say, yes, is Alice here? And they say, yes, who's Alice? And they say, me, I'm Alice. I said, but aren't you Peter? Aren't you Mary? No, yeah, we are, but we're just pretending to be Alice, and we're pretending. So the point we're getting here is that here is a spell. This is exactly what a spell does to us. We fall into the image to such an extent that we believe it, that we're prepared to perform the information that makes up that image. So we get lost under that spell, and it becomes hypnotic. Now, okay, as parents, we can get all involved. We can move all the tables and chairs back. We can clean up and spend hours resorting the house back to bring some order back. Now, you imagine you're standing on a mountain looking down over a city of New York in the distance, or Sydney or Melbourne, wherever you want to look at, and you're seeing millions and millions of people down there destroying nature left, right, and center, because everybody who live for the system are under the spells of the intellectual property that they were taught to believe in that makes up ABC, 1, 2, 3. And out of that comes commerce, mathematics, and all the courses and careers that come out of university. And so you have millions of people representing these images that are made up, that are fantasy. This is all you're seeing is people destroying everything that is sensory, completely, including who they are.
So their belief in their image as police officer or ambulance driver or engineer or train driver means they have to get up every day and do things that are destructive to life, to nature. The police officer's got to get in his or her car and drive around causing pollution. They using.
I'm sorry, you guys. We're getting some background noise. I don't know what's going on over there, but we lost you a little bit, Fiona. Can you come back to the mic?
Yeah, sure. I don't think there's much noise on here,
yeah,
but
we've got none on here at all.
Yeah, I was just saying that as they're acting out their roles as police officer or whatever they're doing, everything that the role of police officer is requires destruction to nature. Just like when we get up every day and we think, we've got to live in this world, we have to drive our cars, we have to live in these houses that destroyed nature. Just about everything we are doing day to day is all adding to that spell that the system's the only way to go. There's no other alternative to the system. If you're out in nature, you haven't got a hope. And so it's all destruction, destruction, destruction all the way.
And let's add to it further, is that, you see, like I said to you about Alice in Wonderland, you can't go and visit Alice and hug Alice and talk to Alice and have a direct first party experience with Alice in sensory reality. Neither can you with Wonderland. All you can do is destroy nature to construct the Supreme Court or Macquarie Bank or money or anything that makes up insurance or anything that makes up all the courses and careers and the titles and deeds that come, which are the props of the Wonderland that is the system. So
it seems to me that the system involves, it's pointed out in the Anastasia books and the Ringing Cedars books that we take living things and we turn them into dead things, And we think that we're really clever for having done this, for having destroyed all of this beauty that the Creator has created. And I think our species is feeling a tremendous amount of shame and guilt for what we're doing, because we know that we're poisoning everything. We know that we're destroying everything, but it's like we're driven to do this because we're under a spell.
But it's also because we're addicted to the good things of the system. You know, this is the big problem, and it's where a lot of people come to. They think, I don't want to live like this, but at the same time, they're not prepared to give up all the perks and lurks. They're not prepared to give up their nice cars or their nice house or their holidays, or they're just even going and having a cappuccino down the street at the cafe. Now, even just that simple act has required lots of destruction and enslavement. The poor people who are picking the coffee beans all day, not to mention the ones building the chairs, plus all the mountains that have been destroyed to build the chairs. Just even going and having a cup of coffee is a monument to destruction. But most people, when it comes down to it, they're not really prepared to give that stuff up to stop the destruction.
And that's because they don't know who they are and they don't know what they're part of. So their purpose for who they really are has been compromised. And basically who they really are has been hijacked. And now they're under the hues of the shadows. Now, what we're talking about, these are images made up by other men and women, others of man, who want to put themselves onto a higher standing. They want to create a way of life where they have a higher standing than another man. And that's what the system is all about, because it was given birth to give power to other men and women, which puts them in the status of pharaoh or emperor or king, queen, or priest, or whatever standing that gives them a bit more authority over another man. So now you have a police officer who's just John Smith, who's been brainwashed to become police officer, and he thinks that the statutes he represents has a high authority and that he has the power of that authority to come and impose his will on you, even though you may never have caused a crime or broken the peace or done anything wrong.
Hey, Arthur, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it appears that there's a commercial happening right as we speak, even though we can't hear it right now. So I'm going to ask you to pause just for a couple of minutes while they're doing their commercials, because we don't want to lose any of the information you're sharing. Okay, so we'll be right back. And we are back here at Birth of a New Earth, having a little bit of technical difficulties tonight. We're here with Arthur and Fiona Cristian of loveforlife.com.au. Welcome back, you guys. We're so excited to be talking with you because some of the concepts that you share are so profoundly important. I wonder if you could continue the conversation about the system and breaking free and how we've been trapped under this spell, and anywhere you want to go with this conversation.
Well, the first thing to realize that we are all the descendants of tribes of man all across Earth who've been invaded by this kind of force, the force that is behind the system. And then after the decimation of those tribes, we've said this in many of our Love for Life videos that are already up on YouTube, where they come as missionaries, scientists, botanists, etc., to live amongst the tribes all across Earth. Doesn't matter we want to call it Europe or Americas or Asia Pacific region. They've done this, and they've recorded enough information about the custom of the tribes, their tongues, the landscape, the environments. And when they got enough information, they then sent in their warships and armies to decimate the tribes. And what remained of those tribes were mainly children who were then brainwashed by the treasure chests that were dragged off their ships, and opened up those treasure chests came their books of his story. And we're talking about his story, not history, it's his story. And another version of that tribe's ancestry was educated to the children. So hence the education system was introduced, providing a world of images that are mainly non-sensory. And the deception goes even deeper here, because they may provide truths, but they hide the lies in amongst the truths. And you can see, we as man, we're the only ones that can set images into motion. All thoughts are images. We're the only ones that can project them. So they know that they've got to conquer our brains. They've got to conquer man's brains and get man to project the images they want us to project, because then hence we'll create the wonderland world they want, which then sets them up in the power structures they want over us, which means we've then set up the prison system to imprison ourselves into by the rulers that we've set up to rule us. So you've got a whole scam here where the ABC alphabet languages is part of this problem, because this is non-sensory. The sound of ABC are not in present sense. It's made up. And we've been taught to project these images, and all the constructs that come out of these ABC images forms the props. It forms all the imaginary world, wonderland, all the infrastructure, everything. So as we grow up as adults in the system, we know about the roads and the rules of the roads. We know about the water and the local council and the relationship we have with the local council. We know about the medias, and we know about generally the way the system operates. We know about the statutes and what we should do and what we shouldn't be doing. And on it goes to, you've got to go to university, you've got to earn money, you've got to get titles, you've got to be somebody in the system, you've got to have some kind of standing. So the penetration of this is intense, because we're pounded by this invasion of these people as we're created as children. And so there's nowhere else to go. And because everyone else has been got at, and they think they are the norms as well of this kind of subjugation of intellectual property, that we wake up, we grow up in a world where we don't know anything else, because we're completely forgotten. And I guess the best way to explain this, Jeanice, is there's a couple of metaphors here that we use a lot. One is the ant colony. You go to the ant colony and you say, listen, guys, we've got a new program for you. It's called Individuals. We are now going to give you an individual program so each of you can have your own politically correct truth. We're going to provide you with laws. We're going to provide you with systems of government, so that each of you can run off to become a punk rocker, engineer, scientist, whatever you want to be in this new program, and we'll make sure to protect it all for you. And all the ants go, wow, this is interesting. We've never, ever experienced anything like this before. And they go, okay, let's do it. And so off they all go to become the individuals. And in the meantime, the program of that saturation, because they're thinking and projecting, and it's all they're thinking about, becomes so present to them that they no longer remember, they're no longer present to who they really are as the ant and the ant colony and the relationship they have to all the other ants. And so what you see here is a degradation, if you want, of their relation to the elderly. They're forgetting their children. And worst of all, they're not maintaining the ant colony until the whole ant colony collapses. And when it all goes down, all the individuals all go with it. And so we have this thing called spiritual suicide, or complete devastation of that ant world. Now, this is exactly what we're doing in the system as man, because we're so lost, we're so forgotten who we are, and we're so trapped in this intellectual property that we're prepared to destroy forests. For an example, you get a man who grows up to become an engineer. He's now representing engineer, and he goes to the forest, and he doesn't see the purpose of the tree and why the tree is bending in a certain direction, why the wind and the breeze and the relationship the leaves have to the bugs and the insects and all the creatures that are resting under the tree. Can't see the big picture. All he can see is the highway he wants to put through it, and the skyscrapers and all the. Yeah.
Arthur, I'm sorry that we've got 8 seconds till another break. I'm really sorry. I want you to hold that thought. Please mark down where you are, because we'd like to pick up in just a few minutes. We'll be right back, folks. Arthur, Fiona, welcome back. I wanted to let people know we're having a conversation while the commercials were running, and you were saying that man is not a species. Can you explain what you mean?
Well, see, again, that is an image that's been put in someone's head. Where can children not exposed to the system, or to anyone who's exposed to the system, learn about such an image as species, as the sound species, without us having to explain it to them?
Well, you know, if man is living in the natural setting, okay, in the natural world with other creatures, we would have a sense that there's all kinds of different creatures and that we are one of many, yes?
Yeah, but the difficulty here is how many images are you now thinking that were put in your head about what you just said? Just think about that. How many of these thoughts you're now thinking are unique to you, that you uniquely created them through your direct relationship with nature? And how many of them have been put in your head by somebody else telling you how to think and feel about all that? Because there's a big difference here. It's like me saying to you, Jeanice, that life form over there is a daffodil, and it's yellow, and it's part of this and that, and it does this and that, and I hammer you with so much information about that, so that when you then come across that life form, that sensory life form, touch, taste, feel, smell, hear, see, when you sense that life form, if your head is so filled with what I've told you about it, you'll represent the images I've given you to it. So basically, you're now disconnecting from it. You can't sense what it's trying to tell you about its purpose. It's like taking a potato sack and putting it over that life form to shroud it in darkness. Now, that potato sack is a hood. It's what we call priesthood, childhood, brotherhood, because you've been hooded. You've been put into darkness. That darkness is images I've given you about what you're looking at, but you're not getting it directly from that life form. So there's the darkness. You've been hijacked. This is the spell. Now, you have to now contemplate on how many images have been put in our heads, in our senses, to represent, because the image of species. Let's go and visit species. Hello, species, where are you? Hello, species, where are your ancestors buried? Hello, species, where are your children playing? Hello, species, what do you do for nature that aids life in rolling along here and now? What is your purpose? Where can our children learn about species without us having to tell them anything about it?
Well, okay, I'm in New York right now. Let's say I'm outside. I had a really interesting experience last night. After I showered, I just went out to stand under a tree, with my bare feet, and out of nowhere comes this red fox. And I'm in the middle of suburbia here. I have never, ever seen a fox in this neighborhood, I've seen one at the beach, but this is the first time I've ever seen a fox. And it came within a foot of me. It like walked right up to me and then right past me and across the street. So I figured it had a message for me, and I'm not sure exactly what that message was, but in that interaction, I'm going to be curious about who this creature is, and how this creature differs from me and what this creature's purpose is, especially what this creature's purpose is in my day. Why did it show up in my night,
That's your unique experience. And this is the great thing about man. We're all unique, not one the same as the next. We're not supposed to be subjected under the pressure of images being forced upon us by another man. We're not supposed to do that. This is why we're supposed to be brought up by nature, because then we have a direct experience with everything without a third party or an intermeddler, interloper, interceder between us and the sensory life form that we are observing. This is how we get hijacked. So it is great for you that you have that experience, and all power to you for that experience. It is important that we can talk about it, but we don't subject each other to some kind of force where we're now under the spell of that belief. Because if I again go back to the daffodil, if I tell you it is yellow, you're now being given an image about the color called yellow. Now, wouldn't it be smarter and better that we go directly to the life form and let the life form tell us everything about it and what its colors are, and the uniqueness of the sounds that you form from your direct experience, direct perception, is what forms the song of life that is the Jeanice that sings, and the sound through the breath of the water that comes out of your mouth. And if we all do that, we're no longer under the spell of another man. And yet we celebrate the joy of man's creation, of this dream that we are part of. What Nick was saying in the comments while we're talking, Nick was talking about that we are species and that we're heading from somewhere, heading somewhere else. And I was just saying to him that we're not heading anywhere. Where did he learn that? Who told him that? You see, for example, people say Earth is a planet and Earth is turning and going around the sun. And we're saying to them it's bullshit. That's rubbish. Because no one can prove Earth is even a planet or even prove that Earth is turning and going around the sun. Now, we've debated with NASA astrophysicists, all kinds of people, right down to theologians and experts, and anyone who's done our work will see this, is that we've left a trail of wreckage, not to harm people, but we've left such a trail of destruction of intellectual property because they can't back their claims. They can't bring forward the first party. For example, they claim that Mars is a planet. We'll say, well, bring forward Mars to back your claim. Let's hear it directly from Mars that Mars is a planet. We don't want to hear another man telling us what Mars is, because that's fraud. You see, if someone comes knocking on the door and they say to you, we have the living word of God here, and they call it the Bible. I say, are you sure this is the living word of God? Well, please bring forth this God to back your claim. Hello, God. Please come forward. Is it true what John and Mary are saying here? This is your living word? Because I don't want John and Mary to be committing fraud here and acting as an imposter of you. I want the first party. See, so we can have a direct experience, direct perception, touch, taste, feel, smell, hear, see. So when we're talking about species, or we're talking about Earth as a planet, or the sun is what they told us it is in terms of astronomy, and that we're part of a solar system. Well, here's another example. Have you ever seen the solar system with your own eyes, the way it's painted in pictures and drawings in books?
Well, not at all. And that's why we should not be teaching our kids this mumbo jumbo that we have no direct experience of. I really get what you're saying, you know?
Exactly. And this is critical, Jenny. This is critical because we have to scrutinize non-sensory images. Non-sensory images is intellectual property. That is all the images of, like, Alice in Wonderland, or the driver's license, or the human that makes up the person that we represent. We have to learn to recognize it, because it is this intellectual property that collectively forms the system. It forms the whole reality that is a fantasy, an illusion, or the matrix. And we've got to learn to recognize it. There's a big difference between non-sensory images and sensory images, right? And this is, I guess, at the heart of our work. And this is why we're saying we've got to scrutinize the images we are thinking, because if we set them into motion, we're then also going to set harm into motion as well, because you cannot set a non-sensory image into motion without doing harm. Firstly, starting with who we are as man, because we're now forgetting who we are. And then if we start forgetting who we are, we start forgetting the purpose of everything around us as well, in the sensory dream of life that is nature and earth.
You know, it's interesting, Arthur, because I lived on Maui for 11 years, and there was a pretty extensive period of time where I actually lived on the beach in a tent. And it's the first time in my life I've ever lived in nature. You know, I lived in the forest at the edge of the beach there, and I would watch the seasons change. And I noticed, you know, that in the fall, for example, the sun would set over one particular island. And as we moved to the spring equinox, the sun would set over a different island. And then it would go back and forth just between these two islands, you know. And I thought to myself, well, if we're moving in a circle, how can it be just going back and forth like that instead of full circle around? You know, it didn't, I just could not put it together. And my direct experience then contradicts the story that we've been told that we are circling around the sun.
Exactly.
And I've just seen as well a comment Nick wrote saying, explains to me why the more educated by the system people are, the less they are able to think critically think. And that's certainly been our experience. We find the more people get educated by the system, the more they become enamored by this intellectual property, that they just can't see past it. And they'll hang on to that intellectual property, even if what they're seeing before their very eyes is telling them a different story. And the way, if anyone has a question, someone will be able to come up with more intellectual property to explain that question away, to make it fit the picture. And this is something we've come across, especially having debates with science and stuff. They cannot get to see how everything they're basing their arguments on is just still the intellectual property. So they're coming at us and saying, no, you see, this is this because of this and this and this. And we're trying to say, no, but that's still the intellectual property. You're not having that direct experience with your own senses to find out whether it's true or not. You're still basing everything on something that somebody else thought before you and somebody else created.
Well, exactly. And in fact, let's take it further. People make these claims based on system science. And so I ask, well, bring forward the microscope. Let's talk to the microscope. Or let's bring forward the telescope. Let's talk to it. Hello, microscope, telescope. Is this true about this intellectual property that Jack Smith is telling us? Hello, microscope. Anyone there? Hello, anyone there? And I get it and holding it in my hand. I'm looking at it. Please talk to me. What is your purpose? And I'm looking through it now, right? And this is the thing is, we get so brainwashed that we go to what we call universe. Uni, one story, verse, story, one act, right? Universe I. If you watch the OPPT videos we've been putting up, part 1, part 2, part 3, we sort of cover the ground of that. There's another video called Under the Spell of Intellectual Property. We can put up these links at the end of the video, Jeanice. We don't have to go too deeper into these kind of conversations now because we've already covered the ground of this in these videos we've been putting up. But here you have a situation where You get a child being brainwashed into the system who grows up to go to university to learn the story, the one act of becoming an engineer or scientist, whatever. And all they got is when they hold something like a telescope or microscope in their hand, and they're looking through it, their head is spinning with all the intellectual property of everyone else, what they were telling them. So they actually can't sense hardly anything what they're observing, hardly anything at all. And all they can do is add more nonsense, because this is all nonsense. This intellectual property is nonsense. And that's what Nick was saying about critical thinking. It's all nonsense. The worship of the intellect is nonsense. There's no sense. And when you have no sense, well, you're obviously lost to reality, and then that means you're a harm doer because you're capable of destroying everything around us, including who we are, because you're lost to nonsense.
Plus, when we're using something like a microscope to try and make discoveries about life, that's only one little bit of information. All we're getting is sight. And but there's so many other senses that make up the whole of the information that is that life form that we can't, how can we possibly decide we know all about that life form just by being able to see it better? There's so much more involved that the microscope can't even begin to show us.
Exactly. This is called divide and rule. This is all about the breaking down of who we are, because we're so lost in fantasy that we no longer have any direct experience. And while we no longer have any direct experience, the wool is pulled over our eyes and we can be trapped into the system. Maybe after this next commercial break, we'll go back and talk about the system and why they taught us about astrology and esoterics and occults, etc. Because
I'd love to do that.
A reason for this. Yeah,
I'd love to do that. I want to say that when I have a master's degree, so I'm fairly educated, and my education was a mixture of both, because I really did learn to think critically. There's no question about that, and to analyze. I was a sociology major, so I got to see the belief systems of our culture and how it's influencing our behavior and the way that we are in the world. So there's that sense. And then there's the research end of it, where they're trying to reduce everything to these freaking parts, and act like they're going to understand something when you don't see the big picture or the whole. It's not the way the world works. Everything is interconnected. Everything fits together as a whole. So we want to talk about that. And yes, let's talk about the system. We've got 6 minutes to a break, and we will be right back. Looking forward to more conversation with Arthur and Fiona Cristian. Be right back, folks. You are listening to Birth of a New Earth. My name is Jeanice Barcelo. We are on the line with Arthur and Fiona Cristian. We're so excited to have you here. And I think when we left off, we were getting ready to talk about the system. Is that right?
Yeah, wanted to carry on talking about how they deceive us. Now, for an example, we mentioned the analogy of the ant colony, how you can turn all the ants into individuals. They run off under the images they were taught. And while they were busy being distracted, pulled left, right, and center, they were then given a system to be governed by, because there has to be some kind of order to this kind of chaos, because all the ants have now forgotten who they really are and what they're really part of. Their true purpose has been got at, and now they've been given a false purpose. With a false purpose comes a false system of living together. So now, if you look at us as man, we are all the descendants of tribes of man that were invaded and decimated by this agenda. And we've all been educated to think and feel images of nonsense, all intellectual property, because the system's all made up out of intellectual property. Now, if you look carefully at things like, here's an example of how they do this. If for example, you're taught to believe in the Bible, and you believe in the images of a almighty, powerful God, a male, a he, and he because the priests are he's when all these things were running around back then and still are, and you've got this almighty super being, creator of everything, looking over his heaven, controlled by archangels to cherubs. Now, if that kind of fantasy is so vivid and so strong in the imagination of growing children, and you accept that kind of imagery, you can then also learn to accept the same imagery of a hierarchy ruling you here on earth in present sense, as above, so below, which is what we call duality. So you've got representatives of this supreme God acting as the priests behind the story of the Bible. So in the same way, you've got an almighty God sitting over all the servants of this God. You now have all the servants of men and women under the power of the church, and the priests, the men who have power over the serfs and commoners. So that's one way they deceive you. Another way is if they teach you to think that Earth is a planet and turning and going around the sun, and that the sun is also turning and going around this thing as part of a solar system, going around a galaxy of many galaxies, going around a universe of many universes, and everything's moving. And we're all tiny aspects of this universe at the effects of greater forces than us. And that's the key thing, greater forces than us, meaning astrology, numerology, and any other belief system that you're going to give power to rule you over with. So we end up thinking also that we're on a journey heading from somewhere to somewhere else, meaning we're prepared to give up in present sense who we really are, what we're really part of, and a true purpose. So while we're distracted thinking about we're living and surviving a roof over our heads and the journey of the mortgage and the journey of astrology or astronomy, the journey of whatever galactic federation is going to come to beam me up at the certain checkout point, or the journey of Jesus is coming with a magic wand to beam me up to the afterlife to sit by the side of your favorite God and Son of God, etc., etc. This kind of spinning vortex puts you in such a situation you're going to give up responsibility for your life here and now because you pass the buck to something else later on the journey.
Well, what would you say? What would you say that we are doing here, Arthur? What would you say is our purpose here?
What our purpose? Well, our true purpose is to firstly recognize the difference between sense images and non-sense images. Unless we can actually disassociate from non-sensory images, which is we're saturated in, we're ever going to be able to start to remember who we are. Now,
I'd say our purpose is the expansion and co-creation of nature, of life and nature that we are. That's our true purpose. And so I guess what Arthur's saying is to get back to that, what we have to do right now is to start making this distinction between the images. And those are the images that lead us down this path of individual, where we're selfish and self-centered, and which is what we are taught to be from a young age. And the big problem with this is that we become
You think you're safe, believing holy scriptures. You think you're smart, following presidents. You think you're made, reaching heights of Wall Street. Well, you're just a puppet in a maze of psychic rain.
And we are back, folks. Jeanice Barcelo on the line with Fiona and Arthur Cristian. So if you could continue about this sand pit that we're in, I would really love to hear what you have to say.
Well, the sandpit is the treasure chest that came off the ships after the invasion and decimation of the tribes, right? The sandpit is the university. It's the sandpit makes up all the languages, all the alphabet languages, all the read and write alphabet languages, because they're not sensory, they're not our true tongue. So because it's coming at us left, right, and center all around us, and because our parents have been got at, and all our peers have all been got at, and as we grow up and we start to merge further and further into the sandpit, all we know is the sandpit. We just don't know anything else. Now that means that the chaos of this individual state that we've fallen under, because, like for example, we're under the state of New South Wales, or you're in the state of New York, or whatever the state may be. That state is a psychological state. It's a brainwashing state with exclamations, if you want to put around the word state. You're in a state, that state of belief, because it's a fantasy. It's so the state of the sandpit is a pretty horrific one, because while we're lost, we need a system for us all to get on with each other. And that system is all part of the false purpose, because while we're busy playing with the sandpit and making up our sandcastles, and you know, I can build that and I can do this and we'll do this and that, and you know, this is basically what we do in the system. We need order. We need some kind of order to this madness, to this chaos. And so for them to have their power, for these people, this Freemasonic satanic world, for them to have this power, they've got to give us a false reality to break us down into individuals. So then they provide the system glue to glue us all together while we're in a state, under that state of the spell of the belief that makes us what we are in the sandpit. So that's the system for you. And this is where it doesn't matter wherever we go. The only way we can break this is we have to remember who we are as man, and to know that the true purpose is the co-creation and the expansion of the dream of life that is nature.
And I think the difficulty is that while we're in the sandpit that's the system, the only toys we're given are system toys. And so we're used to thinking that's all there is. This is all we've got to create with. So our challenge is to work out how to put aside the system toys, the ones that are in the sandpit of the system, and how to go out and find the information from life and from nature and work with that instead. And this is, you know, this is our biggest control over us, is making sure we're so saturated with images that are system images that we don't, you know, we can't see beyond them to think of creating with anything else.
Yeah. In fact, inside that sandpit is the supermarkets. The supermarkets, they're full of aisles of system products and entertainment. You can call it entertainment, really, because the system is all really entertainment to keep us distracted, because without the entertainment, even if it's a trauma and a fear, the distraction, the power of that distraction or the power of that spell won't maintain. So they got to find ways to keep us busy. So we're walking down the aisles of the supermarket of the sandpit, you know, if you wish, and you know, there's 1,001 varieties of options. Oh, look, we can do this today, or we can do that, or I can do this, or I can do that. And so it doesn't matter whether you're 2 years old in the system or whether you're 80, you're going to have sufficient amount of products available in their supermarket of this hell, this system of hell, that you just never, ever, ever can break away. And why? Because the only way they have their power is the system. The only way we give them the power is the system. So we have to break that spell. We've got to break the back of this thing and get rid of this problem, get rid of this madness. And this is which comes to the heart of our work.
And this is the mistake that many people make, is they mistake choice for freedom, because we have so many choices of where to go, what to be, who to be with, all those sorts of things, that we think we've got freedom. And that's why you talk to people, oh, this is a free country, I can go where I like, because they're looking at a country where the control of the system is even more overt, or the belief systems, in fact, have people even more under the skin, under the thumb, so they have less choices than we do in Australia or you do in America. But we've got to realize that choice is not freedom at all.
Exactly, none at all. That's not freedom, because all it is you're just still glued to the system and the force of the system that rules you. And that's what this is all about. And we've got to learn to recognize it, which means that in every area, whether it's esoterics or occults. And you've got to remember with esoterics and occults, people who talk about reptilian shapeshifters, people who talk about aliens, this is all rubbish. It's all nonsense. No one can bring forward reptilian shapeshifters or aliens. No one can bring forward alien life forms from other worlds and to back their claim that these life forms are sensory and that they have a purpose for the dream of life. It goes right through to the belief in astronomy and astrology and numerology and channeling and all this sort of stuff. And this opens up another side to the issue here, Jeanice, is that, for example, we've been told we're children, we're sitting in the year 33 BC because our parents are telling us we're living in 33 BC. Now we know we can't go and visit 33 BC to tell us, is it true that we live in 33 BC? It's just it's all made up. Now, if we're given the story of the Old Testament, and in that story, that his story, because someone's story, is what we call a prophecy of the end times of what's coming, and we're thinking and feeling those images in present sense, and we're breathing them, we're projecting those images into the water of our breath. And as we grow up, we then pass that same image to our children who are also breathing in present sense those images of now 42 AD of the end times to come. And you have the same images being represented, the same story, his story represented through the generations of our descendants. Now we're living in the end times of the story that was supposedly started back in 33 BC. Who do you think is going to create the outcome of those images? And you've got to keep in brain here, that the only one thinking and feeling those images is man in present sense each time we're thinking and feeling them. No one else is thinking and feeling those images, only man. So if what we're saying here, the story that is the prophecy that was built in the story of 33 BC of the Old Testament is self-fulfilling because man's creating it. We're creating the outcome. We're projecting the outcome.
Exactly. We're projecting it, and these images have been so strong. That's how they trap us, you see, because if we can hook into their images, they know that we'll create that, because that's how we create, is through images. So all they got to do is keep feeding us the images that they want us to create. Exactly. And all we got to do is keep taking it on and projecting it out, and then it will happen, in this holographic reality. I wanted to share.
Which is the sandpit. The holographic reality is the sandpit. It's not the real one, because the real one is not invisible. There's a lot of quantum physics going on out there, which is total garbage. In fact, literally all of quantum physics is garbage, and we've proven it in debate. They can't back their claims, these people, when they make claims about quantum physics, and all the nonsense of tablets that are supposed to have been written by reptilian shapeshifting life forms and all this sort of rubbish. This is all part of the scam that builds up the props of the times of those myths. You've got to remember, if you look, there's another subject to cover here, just to give you another taste of this, is that every civilization known to man is the system. Like ancient Greece is the system. The Mayans, Aztecs, Incas is the system. If you look at ancient China, it's the system. If you look at ancient Egypt, it's the system. You look at the ancient Indian civilizations, it's the system. Everywhere you see high priests divinely appointed by God, royal families divinely appointed by God, or the rule of law of God. You'll also find you find they all have read and write alphabet languages, mathematics, and geometry, which makes up the main calendar, which is self-fulfilling as well. You'll also find that it doesn't matter whether you call them high priests or whether you call them judges today, or the royal families, whether you call them pharaohs or board of directors or CEOs. It's all the same nonsense. It's all stupidity of our making. We're the ones creating all this. So it's really important to realize that the system is the civilization, is the society, and all of this is the matrix, is the sandpit, is the supermarket, and all this garbage that we've all creating. And all the time we're thinking and feeling these non-sensory images, we're destroying who we are because we've forgotten who we are, and we're then also destroying everything we are part of. Because while we're living in the non-sense reality of that matrix, we have to construct the dead world. Like, for instance, when we started at the beginning of this discussion, we talked about coming home, seeing our children completely redecorating the household to turn the tables and chairs into the settings and props of Wonderland. Now we have man so lost in the system of the sandpit that we're now constructing concrete, plastic, steel, telecommunications, all the prosthetics and everything else that makes us so severely handicapped and lost, because it makes us slaves to these dead things. Because see, these dead things can't walk, talk, think, feel, poo, we negotiate, contract. They have no purpose for the dream of life. What they are the remains of destroyed sensory life, and we've altered it. And now, because they can't perform, they can't be set into motion by the life that was once present in them as the tree, we now have to perform for them. So now, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, it can't maintain its own life form because it ain't a sensory life form. So now we have to take families that are tribes away from what they are in nature to now have to paint it, clean it, maintain it, look after it. Same as the Supreme Court. You know, people say the Supreme Court exists. And I say, well, let's talk to the Supreme Court. Hello, Supreme Court. Is anybody there? Please talk to us. And all you got is a man coming forward representing the Supreme Court of that image. That man is so lost under the spell of that image. You see, so this is what concrete does to us. This is what plastic does to us. This is what mobile phones do to us. This is what internet does to us. Through the water of our breath, we can actually talk to each other without having to use internet right now. But we've forgotten how to do it. Through the water of our breath, we can actually learn to shift our cells and reposition them somewhere else in the image of the man that we are. But that takes a bit of knowing how to do that because we've forgotten this. With the prosthetics, we have to destroy nature to make us handicapped and maintain a handicapped state. In the system, outside the system, outside the sandpit, we can actually use living sensory images to communicate to each other where we're not doing harm to anything, and we're not causing another man to be under our image or to be under our spell either. So we think that by walking away from the system that we're going to re-enter the Dark Ages. We're actually not. We've actually gradually fallen into the Dark Ages. The system is the Dark Ages. It always has been the Dark Ages.
No doubt.
It's like the frog. It's like the frog you put into water and you warm it up slowly, and the frog doesn't know it's been slowly being cooked to death. It doesn't realize it. Through the gradualism of this brainwashing that we've been told we were tiny little creepy things that came out of the water of evolution to evolve into the species that we call man, that we're some kind of species. This is all nonsense. It's all stupidity, or the fact that our ancestors through the history, because no one can tell me they were there in the Dark Ages. I don't know anyone who's told me they were there in the Dark Ages to see all the horror of those times. So it's very easy to tweak the history into a history and put a slant on it to make it feel like, my God, we just come out of the Dark Ages. We're, the pioneers that slaved and killed themselves, to come onto the lands that where the American Indians once were, or the Aboriginals once were, and now we've all through the descendants. We are those descendants. We've now built the system infrastructure on these lands, right? Which is the dead world, this whole dead system. So what I'm getting at here is that we've got to realize that the sandpit is far beyond most people's present comprehension. We've actually got to get right away from everything they're telling us that are stories, that are images, because it's been compromised. We're so severely compromised. And this brings up another thing about us, because we get hammered by this a lot, by people saying, well, you're still using money. You're still using the internet. You're still doing this and you're still doing that. And I said, yes, of course we are, because we had a choice here. One is that when we woke up to this problem back in 2005 to 2007, Fiona and I had the choice. Do we move out into the bush and become like man on the land and we just walk away from everything? Or do we stay in the system? Now, here's the thing here. The thing is this, is that we got to see technology. These people got technology. We had a minister, a Victorian minister, a state government minister go missing about 4 or 5 years ago. And they couldn't find this guy. And they worried he was going to die in the cold while he was backpacking in these remote locations in Victoria, up in the Snowy Mountain ranges, wherever he was. Eventually, they ran out of all options. And so they called in the federal police, who brought a special plane in. And instantly they found the guy. And the big questions were then asked, what the bloody hell was this plane, what did this plane do? What kind of heat register signal did it do? What kind of DNA? Something's going on here. So we got to realize very quickly that there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to run away from these people. There's nowhere to hide. They can find you no matter where you are. Sophia and I realized there's no point going out in the middle of the wilderness and avoiding it. What we've got to do is confront the system and break it down from within and get people to lead the system and see for what it really is and cause the change to occur from inside it and break the whole thing down and collapse it, which is what we think is what happened to Rome and Babylon and all the previous civilizations.
Listening to Birth of a New Earth. My name is Jeanice Barcelo, and I'm here with Arthur and Fiona Cristian. I did want to share something with you all, because before we took a break, you were mentioning about how if you do go out into the bush, like I did, like I ended up in Hawaii and started living in a tent on a beach, I can't tell you how they harassed me, how they tried to prevent me from living on the earth and prevent me from living a life that was outside of the system. Because most of my time was spent outside. Yes, I didn't have a car, I didn't have a job, I didn't have any money, nothing. I had to manifest food every day. I had to manifest rides by hitchhiking into town every day to get my food and to get my water and to get my shower every day. And it was the worst freaking part of my day to have to do that, to have to go in and be part of the system where I much preferred to be part of what is real, to be part of the original design of the Creator's world. I was so much more at peace and so much more happy when I didn't have to go into the system. But it's like we don't have a choice right now, you know?
Yeah, this goes back to what we're saying. We're so compromised, and the reason why Fiona and I are doing this work and why we're still in the system is because we have to help others wake up to what's going on. Because the true shift in consciousness is not a shift in consciousness based on the main calendar or supposed planets movement and all that stuff, you know, alignments. That's all nonsense. The real shift in consciousness is seeing the lies of nonsense, what they are, and getting rid of them, because they're just burying the truth that's buried underneath it, which is staring at us all the time. So what we're doing is to reach out to help others to see the truth and to see the spiritual suicide of our making, which is all the nonsense images we're setting into motion that do harm. Because we've got to see harm in all its forms, and this is, I guess, is why we're so. I wouldn't know if the word is besotted, but we're so passionate in looking at every avenue of harm doing. Because we've got to be able to see it, take responsibility for that harm, and just stop setting that harm into motion, which then means we have to recreate tribes, which is a way of life without the system and without being told how to think and feel anymore. So there's a gradualism where we got to, like the frog that was boiled to death, we're now got to go the opposite direction. We have to gradually, as fast as we can, though, get back out of the system and returning to nature, where you not longer have to be subjected to the system telling you when you should have a shower, what kind of fluorinated water you should have to wash your body with, and et cetera, et cetera. So you're back now into the true paradise. And that comes into the Steps of Kingdom that we wrote back in 2006, 2007. And another thing we wrote recently called The Spell is Broken. There are 2 articles that I asked people to read about, because this is what we're about, is creating a mass exodus out of the system. We're here to completely smash the system. And the only way you can smash the system is to help people's hearts open up, to see the lies and the fraud and the harm behind it, and to start to walk away from it.
Okay, and we are dancing our way back into the show. We are here at Birth of a New Earth with Jeanice Barcelo, Nick Jordan, my producer, Arthur, and Fiona Cristian are on the line. I think we got like a 14-minute stretch, so I want to give you guys an opportunity to talk about the remedy to this. How are we going to get ourselves out of this nightmare and back to the land of love?
What we just was touching on before the last commercial break was the fact that we've got to start seeing life as a gift. That do no harm are the core principles of man and how we live together, and through that we create community immunity. They're the 3 core things. Now, what I was saying before is that it's about now how we live for you, how we create freedom in your life. Because if we create true freedom in your life, then we've got it too. In the system, people are making claims to have freedom, but that ain't freedom. You cannot have freedom in the sandpit. You're still compromised by the system. You still live for the system. People think that they're getting outside the system, but when you look carefully and they think they're going to move onto land and create communities, you can't move onto land, create communities while you're still contracting with the local council or the electricity companies or the government or anything, right? That makes you compromised. And while you're still going into the system to use the services and the supposed benefits of the system, that is not freedom either, because that means you have to abide by the laws, the rules, regulations, rituals, procedures, conditions, and contracts of the system. And that means that you've also accepted the authority that comes with the system, And that authority does not see you, does not see man, does not sense your true purpose or the dream of life. They only live for the dead world. They only live for the sandpit. They only live for nonsense. So they'll come and do harm. They'll come in force. They come in big numbers to come and remove you from the land or remove you from whatever you're doing that is a threat to them, because, again, the system is where they get their power from. Without the system, they have no power. They must create a system of whatever. The New World Order is the system. The next version is the system under another guise. It'll be a cashless one with no money, but it's still the system. It'll be a man with a trust or a foundation between another man. So having a third party, interloper, intermeddler, interceding between man and man or man and earth is the problem. We must not have any. This is where OPPT has the problem, because it's still a third party. What we're talking about here is about co-creating a way of life where we all see life as a gift. How we live for you. What do we do for you? What do we do for him and her and them? What do we do for that family? How do we create that in their lives? Because if we all do that for each other, we can then all collectively start pulling out from the system, because we don't need the system anymore. Now, that's the gradualism of getting out of the mess. So what we're talking about is creating a kingdom without the G, KINDOM, or do no harm communities. This is a way of life where no longer it's about I or mine or self. It is about everybody else around us. Because by taking care of everything else around us, we get everything as well. For an example, do we have to jump 10 foot across a room to grab our next breath? And obviously the answer is no, because everything of the real world is already taken care of. We're already being cared for. Everything we need is already available in present sense. So it's just an attitude change. And that means we've got to learn how to stop doing harm, stop setting into motion harm. So we're going to have to use the dead world to step out of it. We get that. We realize we've got to use fiction to get out of fiction. Hence, we're talking to you now through Skype. You can see in some of the other videos how we got to use the system to break the system down and break its back and get rid of the problem.
And it really is a team effort. It's like, if we all support each other, then we can make it happen. Maybe not for all of us at once. And this is where people have to leave alone their self-centeredness. We can start making it happen for a few more and a few more, while some of us are still in the system supporting the kingdom with whatever the kingdom needs until the kingdom is up and running, then and able to, the infrastructure is sufficiently in place that we don't need to be in the system anymore. We can have some of us who are getting out of the system and living on that kingdom, while others are still in the system supporting the kingdom. And this is how it works.
Yes, this is the step, because in the steps of kingdom that we wrote this thing called the mudroom. Now, the mudroom for a farmer here in Australia is where when he comes off the land and it's been raining and his boots are covered in mud, he can walk into this room and take all his dirty clothes off and leave it all there, and then he can walk inside the house clean, undies or whatever he's wearing. Now, we have to be able to set up a small part of the land as a mudroom where all the shit of the system can be processed there and be left there. So as we learn to relive on the land, we can now live with nature without doing harm anymore, without losing connection to the tribe that we are part of. Because it's really important that we see life as a team effort. That's why we say in our work that the creatures live for the forest, and the forest takes care of all the creatures, and altogether they maintain the perfection of the forest, that is nature. Men, women, children live for the tribe, and the tribe takes care of everyone, and altogether they maintain the perfection of the tribe, that is nature, that is man. We've got to start looking at life like that. Now, that comes with full responsibility. In the system, we're under limited liability because we're passing the buck to a God or to a Jesus or to the law or to the statutes, or we're passing the buck to some prosthetic that we have to perform for, which makes us dead because we've fallen into a dead state, and we are not operating to our full faculties anymore. We don't have full sense. When we return into kingdom, it's full liability, full responsibility for everything we think, feel, and do. Every image we're thinking, we've got to be conscious that we're not doing harm. And we've got to withdraw from the harm. So hence the mudroom and the transition back into living on the land. The greatest thing of all is we have to learn to give up Deepak Chopra. It's no longer my Bible, my Deepak Chopra, my quantum physics, my system science, my money. It's all about letting go of all of this, because we can't go back to the real one, bringing this intellectual property with us. So the greatest battle of all is to withdraw from intellectual property. Because if we stop setting those images in the motion, we will stop creating the false holograms, the false realities. We'll stop persecuting each other. We'll stop ridiculing and abusing each other. We'll stop rape, pillage, and plunder each other. We stop doing all kinds of harm. And that then frees us up. And when we don't have this pressure of the system, no longer having to wake up worrying about a mortgage, worrying about keeping a roof over your head, worrying about debts and credits, worrying about going to get water so you can wash or drink, worrying about food. When all that pressure's off and you're no longer trapped in the spiraling vortex of that hologram that imprisons us of our own making, now we're free to start to contemplate on the bigger picture. So now it's about many families coming together to start living for each other, all working for each other, all providing, for example, the food forest that we've started here. We're creating so much food, so as more families start to move here with us, we've got food for them to eat. And we've set it up so that they've got food. If we take that pressure off them, then they've got time to begin to put energy into creating food and creating sheds and creating other things. And then more and more can do that. And then that means we've got for more people to come and join in. In the meantime, those who are providing fictional dollars as gifts for us to use the resources to keep creating this, we can build a bigger and bigger and bigger. So more and more of us can start to step into the kingdom zone, if you want to call it, or the kingdom way of life, so that it grows and becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So we're now replacing the system with a way of life that is kingdom. So that means we don't want to create more chaos. We don't want to create more distractions that bog us down, because the system's all about distractions. Everything about the system, even what Jordan Maxwell talks about, is all distractions. David Icke, what he talks about, is all distractions. They're not a remedy. They're not showing us how to step out of the system and have a walk-to-talk way of life where we don't do harm, where we see life as a gift, where we can raise all man up, where each of us are like the wind under each other's wings by the gifts of life that we create, that we set into motion to benefit everyone else around us. This is the only way out of it, Jeanice. There's no other way out of this mess.
Well, I really get that. I'm interested in what Fiona said about that some people are still in the system and supporting those who are trying to get out. That hasn't been my experience personally, is that, if I need to depend on people who are still in the system, there's resentment because they want me to be like them. They don't understand why I'm not working a full-time job.
Well, that's where it comes down to this losing our self-centeredness and living for the bigger picture. There's many ways to be members of a tribe, and it doesn't mean that people who are still in the system cannot still benefit, because in the long run, while there may be some out of the system, preferably if they're living on land, and they are creating the infrastructure that eventually those still in the system will be able to come to. So it's actually a win-win situation if we're working at it like that.
Yeah.
It's so those in the system are still providing the bits of the system we need until we can become independent from the system. But those already living more or less independent from the system are actually providing something to those who are still in the system as well. So it's win-win.
I got to point out here that Fiona and I have been walking the talk of this now since 2006, 2007. It's been men and women very close to us who are gifting us fictional dollars, including Fiona, that's allowed me to do this work full time. And through that, I've been able to reach a lot of people and inspire. And I'm confident saying I've reached millions of people's lives, Jeanice, millions. And we're going to reach more with the music coming out shortly and all the work we're going to do. We're going to impact hundreds of millions of people's lives, because it's the only way we're going to stop this madness. The thing is important here is to realize that, and I don't want to mention all the names of all these supporters. These people live for the dream of kingdom, but they realize they've got to make it. They've got to get us strong. So through our strength, we make them strong. So we receive fictional dollars. People send us all kinds of money. Now here's the problem. While this has been going on, we've received 12 death threats in the last 3.5 years or so. There's been 4 attempts to kill me in the last 3.5 years. We've had Fiona kidnapped over the last 3.5, 4 years. We've had a whole array of things, because now we're walking the talk. This is the very thing they don't want to see happen. This is the Achilles heel of the system, because we live for no system. The remedy is no system. And that means we have to walk away from their stories. We're no longer representing his story, her story, meaning their images. So we've got to be able to get strong and tough here. It's not just and not be bound to fear, because see, for Fee and I, we have nothing else to live for. There is nothing that we wake up, and when we rest, day after day, is the dream of kingdom. There is nothing else for us, which means that eventually there's no more internet, there's no more electricity, there's no more gas, because we don't need it. Our bodies are capable of doing 1,000 times more than what we're doing using these prosthetics. We're just so dumbed down, shrunken, and distorted and beyond our possible comprehension. So I guess it's going to take a lot of sacrifice. For me, I gave up in my life in the system in 2006. I no longer brought in big money. I used to bring in up to $4,000 a week income. I was the breadwinner for the family. I had that the family home that Fiona had stolen from her and destroyed. We had the careers that we set up destroyed, forced us close to destitution and poverty. We got to see there was no community immunity. We got to see that everyone was telling us, "Should be right, mate. No worries, mate." But when you come out of such a situation like this and you realize, Jesus, how do we get like this? And we started realizing how responsible and irresponsible we've been living dumbed down and stupid in the system. We realized there's no point us going back into the system to make money to buy another house, only to possibly go through this drama again or having it all stolen again. So we got clear that, and this is before we read the Reading Cedars books, Jimmy. This is almost 2 years before they came to our lives. We started using our brains because we started researching. We discovered all these court cases, all unlosable court cases, all losing. Clear evidence of fraud of the worst kind. And whether it's hundreds of millions of dollars or $500,000 or $100,000, it doesn't matter. All these totally unlosable cases were all losing. And Fiona and I got to realize we had a case that was unlosable and we're going to lose as well unless we do something radical. So we dropped our lawyers, we dropped everybody. We went right outside the square and we stopped diving into their books telling us how to think and feel. And we didn't realize until some years later that's what we were actually doing. We were trusting our intuition, our gut instinct. And what we were doing was setting into motion a way of life that is kingdom without the system. Because the criteria was we wanted to have community immunity. Harm to you means harm to us. Someone comes to harm you, it means the whole community comes and stops that harm. Because if they come and affect you, it's affecting all of us because we're all bonded. Under the system of individuals, harm to you means, no, it doesn't bother me. You know, life goes on. And so this is a whole change of thinking, and a whole change of, well, basically deprogramming from the brainwashing. So I guess it's going to come back to trust. See, with the system, so with nature, we don't have to worry about everything because it's already taken care of. Every life form takes responsibility for what its form is and the service it offers to the dream of life. In the system, we're still sucking on the nipples of the private corporations for everything. And here's why they laugh at you. These people behind the system, they're sitting in their comfy leather couches and sofas, spitting cognac into the fire, roaring their bloody heads off, thinking that they will never ever break away from this. But we know how to break away from it, Jeanice. We've worked this one out. And this is why
I really get that you do know how to break away, and that it's a process. We have to go to commercial, so
okay.
We'll be right back, folks. Stick around. Welcome back, everybody. You are listening to Birth of a New Earth. This is Jeanice Barcelo here with my producer Nick Jordan and Arthur and Fiona Cristian. We've got a little over 5 minutes left, folks, so I want to give you the floor to share anything that you think is critically important for people to know before the end of our show.
Okay, well, one thing I'd like to say is that I think we have to realize that this getting out of the system, it's not something we can do overnight because we are so conditioned by all the images of the system that weaning our lives out of those conditioning takes a bit of time. It's not something we learn, and it's something we learn to do together as we move along. So sometimes people say to us, oh, what's the kingdom going to be? How's it going to be exactly? And who's going to do what? And we say, well, we can't exactly. We can give you a picture of what we feel, but that's only based on what we know now. As we grow and keep becoming more and more conscious, keep switching on the switches, then who knows what it'll end up as.
Well, in fact, let's make it even clearer than that, is that we become conscious of the ways we do harm. As long as we can see the harm that we're causing, we can start to withdraw from supporting that harm, then we are removing ourselves further away from the system. So we don't have to be bogged down by intellectual property and arguing over the differences of what the truth may be. What we really got to do is just look at the ways we're doing harm. For example, no animal ever gave its permission to be killed and eaten. People say to me that a traditional tribe say to us, well, it's part of their heritage. And I say, well, ask, why doesn't the creature come before you and just lay down? You just take its life and eat it right there and then. Why do you have to hunt them and trap them? Why do they run away? Why all that? See, they don't know how to answer these kind of questions, and it shows you the harm because the life forms that are the flesh and blood creatures we're attacking and killing are not. They're not for us to eat. They don't want us to eat them because they've got another purpose. So
Well, they deserve to live too. Absolutely.
They have life, exactly. So, but nature provides us with fruits and nuts and berries and all kinds of stuff where the repopulation of those seeds is incredible, and we don't have to destroy the trees. We don't have to destroy the forests. We don't even have to destroy the plants, because when we totally woken up, we're living in the moment. We're living in present sense. We're no longer having refrigeration, electricity, and kitchens and all this stuff. We no longer need storage because we've got food forests, and we're living amongst food forests and valleys and plains and beaches and mountains and the extraordinary magnificence of nature in present sense with all our brothers and sisters who live for this dream. But again, it's all about recognizing the harm in all its forms. Are we prepared to stop setting harm into motion? Does it mean that we're going to learn how to stop waking up and going to bed and spending some of our waking life setting the system into motion, which means destruction and devastation to all our brothers and sisters out there and to nature? We've got to learn, how do we start withdrawing so that gradually we're going from 100% supporting the system to 90%, to 80%, to 70%, to eventually none. And that's what we've got to do.
You know, I noticed when I lived in Hawaii, you know, there's so many fruit trees, mango, papaya, coconut, date trees. I mean, there's so much fruit, you know.
There's so much
but
abundance.
what they do is the dark forces come in and knock it all down and pave over it and toxify it. Yeah.
And it's done intentionally. Now, look, with our work, Jeanice, you know, if you can put up the links, when we put the video up on this as well. We've got the Facebook wall, which is the Arthur Cristian, facebook.com Arthur Cristian. You can go and subscribe to that, even though it's all, you can't become a friend. You can still subscribe to be notified of posts. There's 2 Love for Life group Facebook the group set up, which the links are available in which I can. If you go to the YouTube channel and find the videos, you'll find the links in the comments section in there or in the notes section.
And is the YouTube channel called Love for Life?
It's called Arthur Love for Life, Arthur Love for, and it's FOR, not number 4, Arthur Love for Life. And the Facebook, we said, was facebook.com Arthur Cristian. We've also got the website, which you can get all the information from, which is loveforlife.com.au. Now, the most important thing is also you can subscribe. I must not forget this. Subscribe to the Love for Life mailing list, which you can get off our website, or links are provided in any of the articles or videos we're putting up. You'll find those links. If anyone's interested in learning about how to step out of the system, want to support this, because that's what we're committed to doing, and we're stressing the point, people are moving right now here to join with us and us with them. When we're big enough and strong enough and we've organized this, we're just going to take land right out in the open for all to see. We're blatantly going to do it right out in the open for all to see. There are no secrets with us. Everything we're doing is right out in the open. It's always been right out in the open, and we're telling them all out in the open, this is what we're doing. The only thing they can do is they're going to have to kill us to stop us, because they've tried everything to stop us. Intimidate us, doesn't work. You know, if they want to start kidnapping our children, all that, well, everyone's going to know who's behind this. And this is going to create a massive uproar, because we have already got a vast following, Jeanice. There's a large following already, not to follow us as leaders, but people who live for this dream. People, look, everybody we know do not want to live in a world of harm anymore. Everybody wants freedom. Everybody wants truth. Everybody wants joy and abundance. Everybody wants all this, right? No one will come out in the open for all to see and hear and say, no, we don't want that. We want you to still suffer. So this is their Achilles heel. This is their weakness. And this is why we've got to push harder now than ever before, because right now, while they're bringing out the New World Order in the form of the APPT or Franco Collins with his Eucadia, and there's many others still to come, all this is the system under another guise. We have to smash these things and get rid of them, because we don't need the system. All we need is our love for each other, which is setting into motion a do no harm way of life. That's all it is. Do no harm. We have to be conscious of the harm. And that means learning how to...
Thank you so much, you guys. We've only got 27 seconds left. So I just want to say your website again, which is loveforlife.com.au, or you can contact them at Fiona, Fiona, and Arthur, Arthur, Cristian, Cristian. You can find them on Facebook. We have appreciated having you guys here so much.
Thank you, Jeanice.
It's difficult to know.
You're welcome. Bye for now. Have a beautiful day in Australia.
Thanks, guys.
trapped within our world, watching dreams without blue skies floating by. Why are the gray clouds forming overhead, forming overhead? I'm trying to breathe, I'm following the path mapped out from the start. Why do my dreams keep moving out of sight, moving out of sight? Sunshine that I seek shines faintly through the smoke, layers of fantasy, images that blind us to our lives, blind us to our lives. And I'm trying to see, I'm juggling with my things, I'm struggling with the cold, and I'm spinning in a vortex of burning wells, of burning wells. Ooh, and my head's on fire. Oh, where's the love inside my heart to wake me up from storyland, from my deep sleep? We'll save the forest, we'll save the mountains, we'll save the ocean when we save our lives. We'll save the children, we'll save the old ones, we'll save our earth when we save our lives, by doing no harm. Ooh. We're living for the love that lights up in our hearts. We're living for the dream of a world of do no harm. We're living for our kin, our tribe of conscious men. We're living for the truth, no more waiting for saviors.